B&M is one of the largest and most iconic roller coaster manufacturers in the world, and I've ridden more of their rides than any other company, 20 as of September of 2020. Today, I'll be ranking all 20, so buckle up and let's dive in. Here are my favorite B&Ms. Coming in last is one of the 5 B&Ms at Six Flags Great Adventure, Green Lantern. This stand-up has some impressive stats, standing at 154 feet with a 121-foot vertical loop, along with 5 total inversions. Now recently, this has felt rougher and rougher, and the stand-up trains are simply terrible. If this was in a park without a floorless, it would be a prime conversion candidate, and it would be much better off that way. Speaking of stand-ups converted to floorless, here's the original B&M, once Iron Wolf, now Firebird. This is a miniature compared to Green Lantern, and even with the floorless trains, it's pretty rough, has a lot of headbanging, and it really feels its age. The 2 inversion layout is pretty boring. It only gets the slight edge for the different trains. Still, this could easily slip under Green Lantern if I get a couple better rides on Green Lantern. Next up is the first invert on this list, Talon at Dorney Park. This invert simply didn't impress me. It isn't super short, nor is it rough, but it feels like it's just lacking something. Only 4 inversions may be the issue, but possibly it's the location and the layout. The ride feels pretty front-loaded as it knocks out 3 out of its 4 inversions immediately, and then it meanders a bit. It's currently my weakest invert. Next up at number 17 is Rougarou, yet another one of the stand-up models that was converted to a floorless coaster. However, this one is done much better. Mantis was once a large-scale stand-up, but this conversion had much better results than Firebird. This ride does have a bit of a rattle throughout, but it's much smoother than Firebird, doesn't really have the headbanging, and its 4 inversions are much more exciting. However, it just doesn't quite compare to the other floorless models seen later. And on cue, it's our first built as a floorless coaster, the Dark Knight at Six Flags New England. One of the shortest floorless coasters out there, this is packed in the back of the park by the water park, and it features some of the best pacing on a floorless coaster. Even the turns feel tight and forceful. If the ride was longer than 2,600 feet, it would really climb up, but unfortunately, it sits at 16. Next up is the only B&M flyer I've ridden, Superman at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now, this is a clone of the original at Over Georgia, and it's a fun ride with a few standout moments. The one that really sticks out is the extremely forceful pretzel loop. Otherwise, you kind of just glide around. It's a unique experience, but it can feel a little bit boring and short if you've ridden it multiple times. The flat surrounding area doesn't really help. It really is kind of a parking lot coaster. Now, Dorney is a quirky little park, and it has a quirky floorless coaster. Hydra the Revenge features a unique JoJo roll to start, and everything just feels weird on this coaster. The Cobra roll is wacky, the straight drop is just very different from most floorless, and it even has a distinct airtime hill. The smaller scale and the distinct rattle on this coaster hurt it, but it's good. Opened as the world's tallest floorless coaster, Dominator now resides at King's Dominion, moved from Geauga Lake. The 135-foot tall vertical loop is absolutely massive, and while it is kind of a parking lot coaster, I love how you can walk through the largest elements as you go to the queue. Now, this ride is quite complete for a floorless, it's just not my favorite model type. Following one of the largest floorless coasters is the original, and it still holds up today. While it may not be as big as Dominator, I do prefer Bizarro. The big reason is I've ridden this coaster with all its theming and effects running, and it just adds to the fun. That being said, it is rare that the audio and fire work, but when they do, I'll take it over Dominator. Now, next up is Old Reliable, the Batman clones. This one is specifically at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now, not much can really be said here that hasn't already been said. It's snappy, it's intense, but it is short and it is pretty small. This ride is always fun, but it's nothing really unique or special. Most enthusiasts have ridden at least one of these, and I'm sure most enthusiasts enjoy these. Kicking off the top 10 is probably my most controversial placement, Raptor, the invert at Cedar Point. Now, unfortunately, I only got one ride on this, and it really was kind of just underwhelming compared to the other rides at the park, and I think that's kind of why I have this perception of it. It was intense and fun. I remember a little bit of a rattle, and I don't really remember any standout moments. In all honesty, I think I just need more rides on this, but till then, this is where I'm comfortable placing it. Putting Valravn above Raptor. Oops. Even with the vest restraints, this is a massive coaster that still supplies plenty of thrills. The drops are obviously great, and the massive inversions are awesome. The forces are lacking because of the restraints for sure, but sometimes stats matter a little bit. I don't know, it just feels better, and this coaster gets the slight edge over Raptor for that reason. Till I get re-rides. Next up is another great invert, Great Bear from Hershey Park. Now, this is an extremely smooth and fun ride. I did a whole video on this ride going into depth now what makes it great, what are its cons and what makes it really quirky and weird. But basically it's shoved in a tight area but makes the most of its space. Now it could really use another element in there, but hey, who doesn't love a pre-drop helix? Coming in at Lucky 7 is B&M's first launch coaster. It's the sit-down looper, The Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure in Orlando. Now, this sit-down aspect is rare on B&M's, and this ride really throws you straight into an intense and long layout. Not to mention a stunning area and great theming before the launch. And since the new track was installed, it's been butter smooth. Overall, just a great ride. My other dive coaster credit is Griffin, and I think it's certainly the superior ride to Valravn. While it's shorter in height and length and it features less inversions, it has those classic B&M over-the-shoulder restraints. Now, these really allow riders to feel those forces, and it supplies great airtime throughout the vertical drops. I feel Valravn actually has the superior layout, but simply doesn't feel the same. Now, it feels kinda unfair to complain about forces and then to pull out Gatekeeper. Now, this ride really lacks intensity outside of its first drop, but this ride is just fun. The experience itself really feels like you're flying, the inversions and keyholes are great, and in terms of setting, it may be one of the best around, going over the front entrance and around the lake. And not to mention, it's one of the prettiest coasters out there. Now, over time, as I ride this more and more, it may start to slip down, but for now, I kinda like it at number 5. The first hypercoaster on this list falls in at number 4. Apollo's Chariot is B&M's first attempt at the model. Unfortunately, my last ride on this really dropped it down in my rankings, but it's still a great ride. I've had some amazing rain rides that felt extremely fast. Now, the airtime isn't all that strong, but you really can't go wrong with a B&M Hyper. Overall, it's one of the weaker hypers I've ridden, but a weak hyper is still better than most rides. Another hypercoaster is Nitro from Six Flags Great Adventure. This was the first hyper I ever rode, and it really impressed me, especially as of late. The last season or two, it's just been hauling, and it's been giving much better airtime than in the past. The L-shaped layout is fun, and the helix is pretty forceful. And as always with these rides, the drop is long and it feels like it goes on for a while. The setting into the woods is spectacular, especially on a night ride, which I've had plenty of. The only real con for this ride is that the airtime isn't as strong as it could be, and I've had rides that have really no airtime if it's running slowly. Speaking of hypers, how about an invert that almost qualifies as a hyper? Alpengeist is a staggering 195 feet tall, with one of the longest drops out there, both in length and just pure feeling. It feels like it goes on forever as it wraps around the lift tower. And all the inversions on this ride are snappy and forceful, and there's really no rattle and really no headbanging. Even the Cobra roll itself doesn't bother me. The mid-course does kind of kill what would be really a crazy finale with all the snow theming trenches, but either way, it's still great. A truly underrated ride in my opinion. Coming in at number 1 and topping my list is my newest credit and the new for 2020 Candymonium at Hershey Park. The park's second hyper coaster is truly amazing. This ride features sustained floater on the first drop and the first camelback, and even some moments of ejector on the speed hill and on that curved drop that dives under the first drop. This ride really is butter smooth, and it features a helix around the fountain that may not be the best ending for riders, but it's pretty much as photogenic as it gets. While not the longest hyper, every element is designed perfectly and would be nearly perfect if not for the trim brakes. Whew, all 20. So that's my list. I'm hopefully going to expand my B&M credits as they are one of my favorite manufacturers and there's plenty more to ride. And I'm really missing some standout rides like Fury, Orion, Thunderbird. Now, would you like to see another list in this manner, maybe for Intimate? Let me know what your favorite is below, and don't forget to follow Island Coasters on Instagram, and if you're enjoying the content, please drop a like. It really is a huge help. Thank you to everyone who's been keeping up, and till next time, that's all from the shores of Island Coasters.